Hey guys, this is Atul from team K21Academy, and in this part one of a multi-part video series, I'm going to talk everything about containers and Kubernetes. The objective of this video is to keep it high level, a bird's eye view on what is how traditionally we have developed these or these deployment have come far, covering the bare metal, your virtual machines, containers, and now Kubernetes. What are these? The difference between virtual machine and containers, container runtime options like Docker, and the various options that are available. We'll also briefly touch base about microservices and monolithic if you're a complete beginner, but I'm going to give you some pointers in terms of if you want to go read further on these topics. Then we'll also briefly touch base about container orchestration tool like Kubernetes and OpenShift. So I'm going to keep it high level, but in subsequent videos, we're going to go deeper into these topics as well. So just let's begin with the first and the 30 or bird's eye view of how these application development or deployment have come forward. So if you look at traditionally, the applications have been developed on or run on a hardware on which you install an operating system like Windows, Linux, or Solaris, HP, Unix, whatever operating system you run, and on top of that, you run your applications. Then came the virtualizations back in I think 2004-5. The VMware revolutionized the world by an virtualized environment where you have a underlying hardware with the operating system, and on top of operating system you can run a virtualization software using which you can run multiple operating systems. You can have a different type of virtualization as well, where you have a bare metal. On top of that, you can run a virtualization software, and on with that virtualization software itself, you can run multiple operating systems. You can have two type of virtualized environments on that. So the virtual VMware. Then came the containers. Containers been living for long, but I think 2013-14, the Docker revolutionized the way we built and develop our applications. So things like in Docker containers, which is a similar, you have a container runtime options, and then you can build a microservice which is a small part of an application that can run independently with all its dependencies, and you can run and build your containers very quickly, easily, and run multiple copies. As we go forward in this series, we're going to go deeper into the how to create a container, what does this container means, and how do you run and manage these containers. Then with container started problem of managing hundreds and hundreds of containers on a virtual machine scattered across different machines as well. So how do you manage, start, control everything which is called as orchestration, which is a management, start, scaling up, scaling down, everything, all those features. That container orchestration tool like Kubernetes came into picture, and there are a few other container orchestration tool which we'll talk shortly. So this is everything in terms of traditionally hardware to VMware to the containers and container orchestration tool. So if you look at the difference between bare metal and virtual machines, this is a hardware. You have a traditionally bare metal, which you have a hardware on which you install operating system and you run multiple operating systems. Bare metal, as I said, there are two different type of, the hypervisors. There are two different type of virtualized environment. You have a hardware, on top of that you put a hypervisor, and you run multiple operating system. There's another one, I think type 1 and type 2, they say you have a hardware, on top of that you need an operating system, and on top of that you put an operating system, a hypervisor, and within that you can run multiple OS as well. So these are two different flavors of the virtual machines as well. So the difference between virtual machines and containers, sorry, the virtual machines and the bare metal, hopefully you understand now. But then came containers, which is you have a you have a hardware, on top of that you run an operating system, on top of that you run containerized platform like your Docker or CRIO, Containerd, Rocket. We'll talk about that. And then you run something called as containers, which is nothing but using an image. So images is the application, all its dependencies like libraries, binaries. So if you're writing a Python or a whatever language, Java, .NET, Python, PHP, you can all its libraries and application which can run independently, you put them into containers and run them separately as well. And these will go deeper later as how to run these applications containers as well. And Docker is a type of container runtime. Now, the difference between containers and virtual machines or Docker and virtual machine, when I use word Docker, I use interchangeably with containers. Containers. So Docker is a type of container runtime. So what happens is the underlying resources, which is your CPU, memory, disk, usage is very low in containers compared to virtual machines. Also, the hard disk is very small compared to the underlying application to run that disk is very small compared to the virtual machine that eat a lot of uh, disk space or storage. The most important is boot up time. It will take like milliseconds in order to start containers, which we go deeper into the series. You'll see that. And then you can, whereas in here, you can start out very, very quickly on these virtual machines as well. So if you want to know more about differences, I'm going to refer or link these videos. We have a blog which talks about containers and virtual machines where we do a video on going deeper into these topics as well, which we'll talk about later. So these are some of the differences between containers and virtual machines. Now, microservices, you have a big bulky application broken down to smaller pieces that then can run that is called as a microservices, and microservices run on containers. Now, with the scope of keeping in mind that I want to keep these videos under 10 minutes, if you want to go deeper, there is a difference between monolithic and microservices. Monolithic, big bulky application, whereas microservices, that big bulky application broken down to smaller pieces and then can run independently, which we'll talk about that later. So if you want to know more, again, I'm going to give another video and blog on difference between monolithic and microservices wherever you watching these. Now, next is about container runtime. These are some of the container runtime. Started with Docker, then came Rocket, then came you have a open container initiative from a Cloud Native Computing Foundation, Containerd, Cloud Foundry, CRIO, Containerd. These are some of the containers. And if you know anyone else, any other container runtime which I've missed, let me know in the comment section as well where you're watching this video. Now, what happens is if you look at traditionally, you have multiple machines or your operating system. On top of that, you run multiple containers, 5, 10, 15, 20 containers on each virtual machine you can run. So let's suppose there are 5 virtual machines. Managing these containers are scattered across 5 different machines becomes very challenging. And that's the role of orchestration, which is to manage these containers scattered across multiple machines, to start them, to scale up, scale down, if anything fails, to restart them, fix them, and so on. And there are different container orchestration tools like you have Kubernetes, you have OpenShift, you have Apache Mesos, you have Docker Swarm, and so on. And if you look at the market size, the biggest is Kubernetes, which I think 80 or close to 80%, 78% market share with Kubernetes. And then number 2 comes OpenShift. So OpenShift is built, all these tools that you see are more or less on the similar principles as Kubernetes. But OpenShift, what they've done is it's a product from Red Hat, which was acquired by IBM. They packaged Kubernetes. On top of that, a lot more CI/CD tools, etc. Is an OpenShift. We can go, I think probably might put some more links about OpenShift if you want to read more OpenShift. We have a separate videos, multiple videos on OpenShift. Docker Swarm, Mesos from Apache, Rancher, and Amazon, EKS, etc. as well. Now there is something called as managed Kubernetes, which will be Kubernetes on cloud. Like for AWS cloud, you have EKS, Azure cloud, you have AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service, Google cloud, you have Google Kubernetes Engine, and Oracle Kubernetes Engine. I'm going to cover them in subsequent videos, so keep an eye on this. And if you have not liked and subscribed, make sure you subscribe this video or this channel so that we can send you more videos like this. So this is about OpenShift at Kubernetes. Kubernetes is a open source now container orchestration tool, which is now donated by Google to Cloud Native Computing Foundation, CNCF. If you want to know more about Kubernetes, we have a complete series. I think the next part I'm going to talk about is what is this Kubernetes, and then how do you break it down, and the small pieces of these Kubernetes as well. And then OpenShift, I've already mentioned about Red Hat from Red Hat. And this is the, if you want to go read on OpenShift later here. We have a Red Hat OpenShift, why we'll be talking about in subsequent videos on this topic as well. Now, with that, I think we're just under 10 minutes. So if you like, this is Atul from Team K21 Academy. In the next video, we're going to talk about is the Docker file Docker image, Docker containers, what are these, so that you understand and build your container runtime, which is containers. Let me know if you like this video. Give the thumbs up. If you want to know more about such videos, what all things you want us to cover, let me know that as well in the video. Otherwise, I'll see you in part 2 of this multi-part video series with me, Atul from team K21 Academy, talking about Docker file, Docker images, and Docker containers. Till then, bye and take care.